I'm going to talk about wildlife photography tonight. I'm going to tell you why it matters. And I'm going to go through my personal journey in wildlife photography in 5 steps. Then I hope to circle back and tell you how I use the wildlife photography to support conservation, support education, and give back to the community. So I care about nature's beauty. And wildlife photography showcases details that we often overlook. It gives us a sense of wonder. I care about the vulnerability of species and habitats. And every time I see a mylar balloon in a pristine preserve, it breaks my heart, and it happens all too often. Photography showcases the urgency to protect these things. In our day and age where so many people are stuck on their screens and have lost their connection to nature, wildlife photography can show empathy and support. Biodiversity is crucial to maintaining healthy ecosystems, and wildlife photography can show respect and admiration. So respect for the Canada goose, for the female wood duck, for the green heron, and behind the wood duck, a little muskrat. I care about supporting conservation, and photography encourages eco-friendly practices like planting native plants in your yard to support our native pollinators, like this endangered rusty patch bumblebee. And I care about getting outside, and wildlife photography supports your own personal journey, learning about new species, and reflecting on your own impact on the world. So now that I've talked about why it's important, let me describe my personal journey in the 5 steps. And we first connect and start off with our connection with nature, usually through our family pets when we're kids. So how many people here are dog people? How many people are cat people? Well, for me, it started off with a garter snake. And when I was a little kid, I caught a garter snake, and I brought it home, and my parents let me keep it. And I was enthralled with its beautiful colors and the rich textures of its scales and the way that it could thrive without any legs. And it was the start of a lifelong passion for animals and for reptiles. So I went to school to study zoology, and we go out in field trips with our classes, field trips with our friends, and I take photos to document everything we saw on those trips. That's how I started in photography. I document the reptiles we found, the other species we found, the beautiful landscapes, my friends, and the adventures we shared, and I still do that today. This is a trip from Utah a few years ago. Very often, both in college and still today, I find myself out in the field with biologists and herpetologists doing research, and photography can help document their techniques and their findings. Studying mountain king snakes in California, or radio tracking rattlesnakes in Arizona. But what do you do with a degree in zoology? How do you make a living? Well, veterinary medicine seemed logical. It's science. I can get a job anywhere. It's lifelong learning. I can work with animals. I can work with reptiles and make the world a better place. So I spent my career treating mostly dogs and cats. And my photography segued into clinical photography. And almost all the pictures I took were in my clinic of my patients. And if you want to get started in wildlife photography, taking pictures of your pets is a good way to get started. But with my interest in reptiles, I developed a lot of experience and skill treating them and developed a huge caseload of very interesting patients. And I would take photos of the interesting patients, the weird diseases they get, the surgeries we do, the techniques and the treatments, like this 125-pound alligator snapping turtle. These are endangered in Illinois. They only barely get into the southern tip of Illinois, and this one was confiscated. Someone was keeping it without a permit. And DNR brought it to me. They wanted a blood sample to check its DNA and see if it originated from Illinois or from another state. Well, you have to know how to get blood from a turtle and avoid the bitey end, right? And luckily, they have a readily accessible vein in the tail, so it was easily done if you know where to go. You don't want to just stick a needle in a turtle. It ended up coming from Louisiana. Or this python breeder from Indiana. One of his prize breeders had laid 55 eggs, but seemed kind of lumpy when she was done, and he was concerned that she was suffering from egg binding. So he brought her in, and we sedated her and took some x-rays, and sure enough, there were 5 eggs that she was unable to pass. So I ended up needing to do a C-section on the python. Reticulated python, 18 feet, 10 inches long, 165 pounds. That table on the left is big enough to hold a St. Bernard. I needed an extra table for this snake. But we used full gas anesthesia. You can see the endotracheal tube. You can see the heart monitor taped to her heart. I had to make 2 incisions because they were spread out kind of far. But she recovered very nicely and went on to breed for him again. Or this family pet, green iguana, 19 years old. The owner was very concerned. She lived up in Kenosha. Her iguana had stopped eating, but it didn't seem to be losing any weight. It was pretty easy to make the diagnosis. It had a ginormous bladder stone, probably from chronic dehydration, a rainforest animal being kept in a house in Kenosha, not hydrated enough. Well, you remove a bladder stone the same way you do in a dog. Again, general anesthesia, the endotracheal tube fixed with that tongue depressor. You can see the surgical staples closing that. And she recovered and lived the rest of her life perfectly normally. So I have a big portfolio of clinical cases of reptile cases, and I use these to illustrate articles in veterinary journals and also scientific journals, and sometimes even got some cover art. I wrote chapters in textbooks on reptile medicine and used the photos to illustrate those. And I also loaned the photos to colleagues readily because I support education. And very often they'd call me up and say, I'm doing a chapter, giving a lecture, maybe on reptile ophthalmology, maybe on reptile neurology, and I don't have the slides that I need. Can I borrow yours? And I was happy to loan them. And sometimes I was even able to get cover shots. And of course, with the portfolio, I gave my own continuing education lectures to veterinarians at conferences and also to veterinary schools, both nationally and internationally, because a picture drives home the lesson far more than just words. Well, this got me involved in a big conference in Florida. It grew and grew over the years I was involved with them to over 25,000 attendees each year from over 80 countries. And it was such a huge and successful conference that they decided they wanted to hold conferences in other countries as well. And that birthed Veterinary Expeditions, Part 3. And I suddenly found myself in Antarctica. The first conference, a group of veterinarians went to Antarctica, and we learned about climate change. We learned about how the glaciers were melting and the snow was melting, and how did that affect the local wildlife. We learned about local wildlife diseases and other environmental pressures they were undergoing. And we got to see it firsthand, with penguins porpoising through next to the Zodiac, being chased by 12-foot-long leopard seals. And the conference was so successful that they had another one the following year up in Canada to look at the polar bears. And the polar bears gather along the shore of Hudson Bay in the fall, waiting for the ice to freeze up so that they can go out on the ice and hunt the seals. And the ice is happening later and later every year. The polar bears are starving. They have to find alternate food sources, and this leads to conflicts with men. I also learned never to complain about Chicago winters again. And if you think tonight is cold, luxury. The next year split the difference, we went to the equator where the Galapagos Islands were. And here we learned about extinction and we learned about evolution. So this is Lonesome George, the last Pinta Island tortoise in the world. And we got to see him in person and take his photo. And sadly, a couple years after we were there, he passed away, and that species is now extinct. And that really drove home extinction as an event, made it personal to me. But we did get to see other species of Galapagos tortoises in the wild. We got to see the iconic marine iguanas that jump in the ocean and they eat algae off the rocks on the bottom of the ocean. And we learned about evolution with the example of the flightless cormorant. Its wings have become vestigial and it's lost its ability to fly because it doesn't need to. There are no predators in the Galapagos. It just jumps in the water and catches fish. We went to the Pantanal of Brazil to see the jaguars. And jaguars, of course, are undergoing tremendous pressure throughout their range from habitat loss and hunting. And the ranchers who raise cattle in that area used to shoot the jaguars who would take some of the cattle, but they found out that they can make a lot more money by having eco-tourist lodges than raising cattle. And of course, more jaguars means more tourists, so all of a sudden the jaguars are thriving in this area. As are the hyacinth macaws, the largest macaws in the world, under tremendous pressure from habitat loss and overcollection for the pet trade, but they're doing very well in the Pantanal. And of course, the capybaras, the largest rodent in the world, basically a 150-pound semi-aquatic guinea pig, so big that the birds can use them as perches when they hunt for insects, like this wattled jacana. Then we went to Rwanda to see the mountain gorillas, one of the most imperiled great apes in the world. There are only 1,000 of these left in the wild. That's not very many. And they live in preserves that are surrounded by surprisingly large populations of people. And the people go into the preserves and set snares to catch food for their families. But unfortunately, the gorillas get caught in the snares, and they get injured, and they get crippled, and sometimes even die. Well, the local government has started hiring local people to be porters for the tourists who come to see the gorillas. And each tourist gets his own porter to carry the backpack, carry your camera gear, carry your water bottle, help you through the rough terrain as you hike up into the mountains to see the gorillas. And so here I had one of my most favorite experiences with wildlife. We found a troop of gorillas. We were watching this cute little baby as he was swinging on a vine, and I was taking an iPhone video. He was that close, and I looked up, and there's a 450-pound silverback coming right at me. And I wasn't really scared because they taught us they're not aggressive, but they said it's very important to follow the gorilla's body language. And the first thing is no eye contact. Eye contact is very aggressive. So you turn sideways so that you're not making eye contact. And then you want to be submissive and let him know that he's not being challenged. So you have to get low and be all submissive. And I look up and take a picture, and he's still coming. And I take another picture, and he's still coming. And he came and he sat right next to me. And this was taken with a wide-angle lens. And I leaned up and took a picture. And he was as close as Tom is to me right now. I could have touched him. It was exhilarating. Well, with all these great experiences, I wanted to become a better photographer. And so I started booking trips, part 4, with professional wildlife photographers to see wildlife and learn better techniques. So the first trip was to Alaska to see the brown bears. And of course, any competent photographer can take a nice picture of the mother with her cute little cub. But these photographers push you beyond your comfort level. Zoom out and include the landscape, include that mountain and the fog bank rolling in. Or get up early in the morning and catch the bear when he's walking right between you and the rising sun and catch that beautiful rim light. We went to Namibia, and our guide here was a photographer, but he was also a veterinarian who had been raised as a hunter by his father. So he understood animal behavior very thoroughly. And we were following a cheetah walking through the grass next to the road, and the guide looked up ahead and said, "There's a termite mound. Quick," to the driver, "pull up next to that termite mound, focus on that termite mound, because when the cheetah gets there, he's going to jump up on top and survey his terrain." And sure enough, he did. The desert elephants, a bachelor herd taking a dust bath. The guide looked around and said, "Park over there. They're going to walk right past the truck and cross the road here." And they did. So we get a picture of them coming towards us rather than running away with a butt shot. And the snowy owls up in Canada, the guide up there understood their behavior and taught us when they take off, their wings go straight over their head, and you don't want to clip off the tips of their wings, so zoom out far enough. And when they take off, they kick up a little puff of snow, and if you can catch that backlit, it makes for a much more interesting photo. And when they come zooming into a perch, they glide right along the surface of the snow, so get low so that you can show that angle. So now I've learned all these skills, and I come back to Barrington, and guess what? There's a ton of wildlife right here in Barrington. There's a ton. But you got to know how to find it. You got to know how to approach it. You got to understand its behavior so that you can anticipate the shot and set up. Like this yellow warbler who comes back to the same perch, flies away and comes back. The short-eared owl glides over the prairie with that beautiful sunset in the background. Or the eastern bluebird, it's challenging to approach, but it can be done if you're careful and stealthy and zigzag towards it slowly, reaching up and taking photos. Wendy Paulson taught me the Henry David Thoreau quote about the eastern bluebird. "He wears the sky upon his back." Isn't that great? Or the sandhill crane with its cute little colts. You have to approach it slowly, close enough to get the photos, but you need to stay far enough back that you don't disturb it. It's important in wildlife photography, you don't want to change the animal's behavior by your behavior. You want to keep back and let them do their thing. Or deer in our own backyard. They're in the backyard, the doe and its fawn, go into the side yard. Now I could have run out and chased them and gotten the butt shot of them running away, but instead I snuck out the front door and waited on the front porch for them to emerge from the woods and get a portrait. And be looking out your windows all the time. If you're stuck watching TV or reading a book and not looking out the window, you're missing an amazing amount of wildlife in your yard. I'm looking out the windows all the time and spot the great horned owl that shows up during a blizzard. So how do I give back to the community? I volunteer a lot for Citizens for Conservation. It's a volunteer organization here in Barrington, and a lot of you have seen their signs around the area. They have about 14 preserves with some 730 acres in various stages of restoration back to natural plants and natural prairies. I work with restoration, I work on the burn crew, but I'm also a bluebird monitor. We monitor the nests. When they build their nests, we record the dates. When they lay their eggs, when the eggs hatch, when the fledglings leave the nest, what other species use those nests, and the photography helped record that. I'm a frog monitor. I go out and listen to frog calls at night, and you can tell the species of frog by its individual call. It's unique for each species. So this is a Cope's gray tree frog. And I'm a bumblebee monitor, and this is my favorite. I monitor 4 preserves. We count how many species of bumblebees are on those preserves, and we count how many individual rusty patch bumblebees there are because they're endangered. But we need a photo of each species and a photo of each rusty patch to confirm the identification. And I'm proud to say that in all of McHenry County, all of Lake County, and northern Cook County, 50% of the rusty patch bumblebees observed in the last 2 years have been on CFC properties that I've observed. That shows that our restorations are really having an impact. I also give back by donating my photos to CFC. They use my photos for their William H. Miller Award and their Great Blue Heron Award to outstanding volunteers. I donate individual prints to charity auctions to raise money both for conservation and also for veterinary research. And I donate my photos to social media. And finally, there's the Barrington Area Digital Photo Gallery, badpg.org. Check it out. There's some 12 photographers who have donated their photos free of charge. This was created by Bob Lee. He wanted to preserve and showcase the natural beauty of the Barrington area. So all the photos are from the Barrington area, but there's a landscape album, a wildflower album, a bird album, a mammal album, and so on. But there's a slideshow. So anyone with Wi-Fi and a big screen can have a slideshow of nature photography in the background, and they're gorgeous photos. As an example, here's a little section from the bird album. These are all bird photos that I've donated to BadPG. So that's it. I hope my images inspire others to appreciate and conserve the beauty of nature. Thank you.